It's not a matter of if your sales will sometimes dip. It's a matter of when. And if you don't have an action plan in place before your sales dip, then when they do, because they will, you won't know what to do when it happens. Welcome to the Profitable Coffee Business Podcast, where we help coffee shop and roastery owners build a profitable coffee business that takes great care of all the people, including them. I'm Michael Ryan. I'm a certified business coach and consultant that helps cafe and roastery owners build a profitable coffee business that takes great care of every single person, including the owner. In this episode, we're joined by Maxwell Mooney, and we've broken this episode into two main pieces. The first piece is how to avoid your sales dipping in the first place. And the second part is how to respond when you find that they are dipping. In the first portion, Maxwell gives very practical, tactical advice for how to avoid sales dipping in the first place. He talks about things like strategic planning sessions, for example, a SWOT analysis, how to do it, how often to do it, and that sort of thing. How to plan for and anticipate downturns. Why it's so important for your business to read the room continually to make sure you're still filling the need and you're still the best at filling that need. Why it's so important to observe your staff from your cafe monthly. How to improve your cash position so that if and when sales do dip, you're not pulling funds out of your personal bank account to feed payroll. And how to establish effective lead indicators so you can see the sales downturn coming before it actually manifests itself. In the second section, we talk about what to do if sales do actually dip. We talk about why you need to increase your threshold for what your definition of sales dipping means. We talk about how many payrolls in a row you should allow sales to be lower than expected before you start taking concrete action. We talk about the importance of asking why sales are lower than expected. Is it because a road is closed, or is it because your staff is not delivering on the core guest experience anymore? Speaking of which, we talk about why you need to protect the core guest experience as your first course of action at all times. We cover how to audit your business and make sure you're actually doing the job you think you're doing. And Maxwell gives very specific examples for how to increase average ticket and cultivate an enthusiasm with your staff. And if and when things do get really tight, for example, if you find yourself pulling funds out of your personal bank account to make payroll, Maxwell talks about how to triage the situation so you can preserve the guest experience, take great care of your staff, and still be open for business. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that our free course, The Profitable Coffee Business, has launched and it is available inside of our school community, The Profitable Coffee Business. You can click on the link in the description below to access that free course. We walk you through our profit framework for how to price based on costs, how to set revenue targets, how to organize your cash flow, how to fix your prime costs, increase sales without adding any more customers, and how to track what matters so that you can be predictably profitable in 90 days or less. Click on the link in the description to access our free course and join our school community now. And now for my conversation with Maxwell Mooney. All right, Maxwell, welcome back. So good to have you. In podcast world, at least people who are watching these video wise, you will have gone an instant transformation. So that's exciting. Maybe some other time we can talk about that journey because I think it's been almost 2 years since we've actually recorded anything. And so it'll look like an instant transformation for people who are watching on YouTube or watching on Spotify. But I want to talk about that some other time. Today, I would love to pick your brain for something that has come up on a lot of strategy calls and even some one-on-one client calls. A lot of owners are finding themselves kind of looking at sales year over year and finding themselves in a position where everything is down 10, 15, 20. I even talked to one person whose sales are down 25% over this time last year. And, red flares start going up when you have that realization. And so I do want to get to action steps they can take if and when they find themselves in that position. But I wanted to start by asking, from your perspective, how do we make sure, as much as we possibly can, as much as it's within our influence and our control, how do we make sure that we just never end up there in the first place? Because a lot of people are going to be listening and they're like, well, that's not me. Great. Let's make sure it's never you, or it's as little likeliness that it would ever be you as possible. What are some proactive things people can do to avoid ever getting into this position in the first place from your experience?
Yeah. The honest truth is that there are so many different reasons for why sales could be down. And so it's pretty important to think through all of the different occasions why that might be the case. And one of the things that I've always stressed with clients about is to really spend time with strategic planning exercises. And one of the hallmark strategic planning exercises is what's called a SWOT analysis, which is where you basically just evaluate your company's strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats.
Yeah.
And what I think is really helpful about that for evaluating a strategic position is that it breaks it down into things that you can control that are internal, like your strengths and your weaknesses. And then it also evaluates things that are external, which is like your opportunities and your threats.
That's
and
good.
so sales can be down for both of those sort of like reasons, for internal things and external things. And depending on the true source for where those sales have gone down, and maybe it's some of both, right? Of course. But depending on where those are coming from would sort of inform a strategic response to those in a slightly different way. And so what I think is really helpful from the get-go is having a cohesive strategy that sort of evaluates the position that you have and the water that you're swimming in to help you sort of like plan for and anticipate those things. And so to get into a place where you don't get into that in the first place is to really, one, read the room right well, but then to continue to read the room and just to evaluate and ask yourself like, hey, where are we at now? Time changes, people change, things change, the industry changes. And so just paying attention to all of those things and always asking the question back of like, what need are we filling and how well are we filling it? And are we still the best possible option for filling people's needs in this given area? And what are our values and how do we align those things and make sure that we're meeting those things really well? And that at the end of the day is where you're going to help navigate sales from dipping in so much as you can, right? And there may be certain activities or certain events that are happening geopolitically or like globally that we don't have perfect control over, but we can have control over our response to them. So I guess that's where I would start, is like back to that initial sort of like fundamental job of a business, which is to fill a need. So
I love it.
I know that's a little bit of a non-answer in the sense that we don't have a specific example, but we can jump into some specifics.
Yeah, 100%. No, I love that a SWOT analysis, the S and the W are kind of inward focused. Like, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Kind of inside of our circle of concern or circle of ownership. But then opportunities and threats are outside, kind of looking in and then looking out. But I do love that it's first in and then out.
Yes.
I love it. Just is so much more helpful to direct the attention and effort and energy inward first and then outward after. So I love that it's almost like I had never thought of a SWOT analysis as that sort of baked into the SWOT analysis. How often for the just average coffee shop and roastery business, how often would you recommend doing a SWOT analysis?
I'd say definitely before you start is the right time to do your first one.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Then I like to create a more consistent rhythm at 3 and 5 years. But at the same time, like you should always sort of be evaluating, right? And just like, hey, does this information still land well? Is it still salient in the world that we're in today?
Yeah.
And certain things are cataclysmic, like, a global pandemic, right? Of like, okay, this world is not the same as it was 2 years ago or even a year ago. So maybe we should reevaluate for what we're currently experiencing.
For sure.
But generally speaking, like once every 3 years is enough, or, on your third year and fifth year, 10 years, like somewhat common sort of ways to do it.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. How often, so like when owners are sitting down to run payroll, or whoever runs payroll is running payroll, that's often the cadence that I'll encourage them to do, kind of a digital dashboard or a scorecard of some sort, to just like, hey, we just ran payroll. So you by definition have payroll, you have the pay period, so you can pick up sales for that pay period. Sometimes tracking cost of goods sold on that tight of a time frame can make it look weird, but let's just say, for the sake of the example, we encourage people to track at least sales and payroll, so labor percentage, on the cadence that you run payroll, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, twice a month, whatever. How many payrolls in a row, if sales are down over this time last year, how many in a row before owners should really start thinking in terms of like, okay, this is not a one-off. This is like a pattern, is a new trajectory that if we don't step into and address. What kind of, how many instances make a pattern in that context from your perspective?
Yeah, I guess one of the things depends on how often you're running payroll, but let's just assume every 2 weeks for the sake of what most people are doing. 100%. I would say by the end of the third payroll, if I notice that things are down a little bit, I'd be like, interesting. Is this a larger systemic thing, or is something going on?
Okay. Yeah.
Especially something that's unexplainable, or like you don't have like an obvious outside thing, like maybe your street got closed down for, repairs or stuff, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if on my third go around and I didn't know of any immediate sort of like reasons for why it would be down, that would sort of make me go, we should go check in on what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. Have you ever either had this experience or worked with somebody as a consulting client where sales have dipped to a point where they actually needed to change their business model a little bit to accommodate it? So like in the past, we've talked about, it just really broad brushstrokes. Hey, it's probably not necessary or even feasible to have a dedicated cafe manager if that location's not doing at least around $750,000 in annual sales, just to throw a number out there. What if sales are down so low that it's actually gone from above that number to way below that number? And meaning we might, I'm not suggesting that we would fire people for the sake of making things work, but like if sales drop too much, there might be some business model changes or some org chart changes, or the owner might need to pivot or slide into some new role. What have you had to do, if anything, or what have you had to encourage people to consider doing to kind of tighten their belts and make it work at the new equilibrium that they're experiencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'd like to maybe step back just a little bit more before. I think this could be getting a little cart before the horse when it comes to like the exact sort of method. This is more of a tactical sort of question than a larger strategy thing. So I guess my first encouragement would be to say, when you do notice that sales are down, is to really dig into why, right? And try to spend time understanding what the why is. Because it could be any number of things. It could be guest experience. It could be a change in seasonal patterns in your area. It could be an economic downturn, like nationally or globally. You could have changing demographics with so many people moving in and out of like where they've been before that, you're still like you essentially have a whole new group of people that you have to introduce yourself to. And maybe you haven't spent a lot of marketing efforts to reintroduce yourselves to this new group of people. It could be operational mistakes where like you're understaffed or overstaffed or have the wrong team on hand that's tanking your guest experience. It could be that you are running out of product so much that your guests don't trust you anymore to be able to provide what it is that you said that you were going to do. And so maybe you need to look at addressing those things. Or maybe you're in a more competitive landscape than you used to be. And now, you used to be the biggest kind of fish in the pond. And now you have 6 other cafes around you that are doing a better job than you. And so you're just like losing people that way. It could be any number of factors. And to me, the best way to help you think about how to fix the problem is to understand what the problem actually is. When you're doing repairs on your home or like a vehicle, and especially if you're a DIY kind of person, there's a phenomenon known as throwing parts at it that can happen where when someone's trying to fix a problem, they just go to the first thing that they think of as like a potential solution and they just replace a part with it instead of like really spending time diagnosing the problem and understanding what's really breaking down. And the thing that makes a great mechanic separated from an okay mechanic is their ability to diagnose and to run tests to figure things out. And I think it's very much the same when it comes to the health of your business. You should be a doctor or a mechanic when it comes to understanding what's going on. And with that information, once you've diagnosed the system properly and figured out what it is that's breaking things down, then that helps you develop a plan that can help you to correct for it in a better way. So back to your specific example, to my mind, if our sales have been to a specific level and now they've gone down significantly, let's say, we were at like $780K annually in revenue. So we were able to, have a cafe manager that was dedicated to that. And all of a sudden we're down to like 450, right? In that situation, I'm going to be looking first at what's driving that. That could be a leadership issue. And in that case, like if it's due to things not being stocked well, under training and under resourcing your team, that could be your own responsibility, or it could be the responsibility of your manager. If you're constantly having turnover all the time because your manager is difficult to work with and like unreliable or just unfriendly, like all of those sorts of things, like that to me is like a clear, let this person go. You're seeing sales dip substantially. And at the end of the day, responsibility must come with accountability, right? Those things have to go together.
Totally.
And so you have to be willing to hold people accountable if they're not going to be performing well. And at the end of the day, a manager is a job that should be based on performance, right? Of course, your cafe has its own performance that it has to meet. But part of the signal that you're getting from sales being down is that maybe it's not performing quite where people need it to be. So that could be one thing. And to me, I guess I wouldn't call that a change in business model so much as it is maybe a change in practice to sort of right size and figure out what's going on. And we do see that happen, right? Like when
Mm-hmm.
you watch large corporations, sometimes they have to make corrections because they've overshot their their run a little bit.
Totally.
Right. And like that's always a painful thing, which is why I tend to be really cautious and careful when it comes to hiring people, because I view it as a responsibility to like take care of people.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like a little bit hesitant to just bring on new people without like really knowing that you can support them. Because I don't like having those hard conversations where some companies, you know, will just lay people off like it's nothing. And to me, it's not nothing.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world, but it's not nothing.
Right.
So I guess like to me, that's one of the things that I look at having to do, but there may be a time where you have to, right? And part of leadership is being brave and making hard decisions and having a hard conversation and then doing your best to do right by everyone involved.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I often think of the airplane analogy and I'm bringing it back up because it can sound sometimes like I'm suggesting just axing people just to make ends meet as like a primary strategy. But I think of a business like an airplane, and I think of an airplane or an airline company who's just like constantly overpacks the plane and then is like, oops, and then just like throws people out the door as their solution. Like that's not going to work very long if that's your main strategy, is just overpack and then toss people out when you can't seem to get off the ground. So never want it to sound like I'm suggesting that. Yeah, I was thinking about questions I would ask back to somebody who is concerned about sales going down, and I think a lot of it is the tracking and the asking the question, the tracking and the asking the question why. Like you were saying, I have had probably hundreds of conversations at this point that have had some element of sales are low. And I'm like, show me the numbers. And the sales are not low. Sales are not down, or not down over this time last year. So it's almost like a false read of the numbers. And I've learned over the years to not let, especially clients, use qualitative language with me with stuff like this. If they're like, oh, we had a really slow day, it's like, numbers. Tell me the numbers of that slow day or that slow hour. And very often that's not actually the case. It's not, the read of the numbers is not accurate. It's not true. It's not useful to look at it that way. But doing a regular SWOT analysis and tracking key metrics on a regular basis. My question, I apologize, was I kind of jumped to the next bucket that I want to come back to the first bucket. It was on my mind and I just blurted it out. Going back to the first bucket of proactive, probably everybody's heard the phrase, if you're not growing, you're dying. Do you look at your, dashboard, your scorecard every payroll period, and do you look for it to be a little bit higher over this time last year as sort of like the definition of healthy, or is it okay if it tracks this time last year? From your perspective, like, would you look at, hey, sales are exactly the same as this time last year? Mm-hmm. Would you look at that and be like, that probably shouldn't be that way. Actually, it should be a little bit up. But, I could, there are a lot of ways that you could interpret that, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like when you look at it, if it's exactly the same as it was last year, is that neutral? Is that positive, or is that negative in general? And you're going to say it depends.
I know. I'll give you a real answer. The real answer is that would concern me.
Yeah.
Because generally speaking, the economy as a whole is like climbing, inflation is climbing. And so if you're staying exactly flat, you are losing money, right? Like you have less active dollars than you had last year. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that would be worrisome. It wouldn't be like necessarily change every single thing about this company.
No. Yeah.
Right. But to me, that would be like, this is worth taking a look at and like figuring out.
Yeah.
It's like if you're not seeing at least 10% year over year growth.
Yeah.
As far as just raw revenue dollars go, like to me, that would be a worthwhile poking in and doing some diagnostic work.
Totally. That's why I'm asking, because I have a lot of conversations with coffee business owners, and when we do look at the numbers and they're identical, I'm always like, that probably shouldn't be that way. And consistently they're like surprised, like, no, that should be fine. But it's not fine because you raised your prices since this time last year. So why would sales be exactly the same? Mm-hmm. And you gave everybody raises since this time last year. So maybe sales are exactly the same, but labor is probably higher than it was as a percentage of sales over this time last year. And so part of the reason I asked the question is because I feel like people shoot up the flare for help way too late. A lot of times, like they wait till sales are down 25% before they're like, that's probably not good. Like you should have shot up the flare when sales were the same as this time last year, so that we could start to track more aggressively and explore a little bit more with a little bit more curiosity. That's why.
Yeah. And I would say too, like something that's worthwhile is if you actually spend time evaluating your trend line, like your growth line year over year, right? Like anytime that you're suddenly off pattern, that's like should indicate, hey, this is worth taking a look at.
Yeah,
Because if
that's
you've
good
been
word.
growing 30% year over year and all of a sudden you're only doing 20%, like to me, that's like, okay, hold on. We got to look at something's different.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, that's the real answer
Mm.
to the question is like, if you've spent time and you've got enough business history to have that kind of data, that's really what you should sort of be like looking at as a metric for, you know, how healthy things are.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes again, like there are internal and external reasons why things can happen and why things can slow down. But that's what I would maybe recommend taking a look at.
100%. I hear people talk about lead indicators and lag indicators a lot. And lead indicator just meaning that it's a number you can track that indicates or generally leads to, you know, an increase in sales. For example, tracking your email list growing. Of course, that's not dollars in your bank, but it does tend to lead to an increase in sales over time. Did you guys ever track any lead indicators? Like, did you look at things like email list or like number of followers or like number of Yelp reviews or whatever, or number of Google reviews? Did you look at any of that stuff on a regular basis? And did you treat it like a lead indicator?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of it's very obvious, right? And it depends on the style of business you're running.
Yeah.
But like a roastery has much cleaner lead indicators than a cafe does.
Yeah,
right. Like your email list, you can watch, and if you know that you convert 6% of your emails into sales regularly and consistently, that means every time you grow your email list by 100%, you grow an additional, 6% of sales like right behind it. So growing your email list fundamentally leads to increase in revenue, right? And so that's a very clear lead indicator. It's a little more squishy with a cafe, right?
Yeah.
And so you do want to find the things that do seem to make a difference. There are things that I always look for, like press references, like showing up in local newspaper, social media, like following and engagement. And then like just tracking, your overall, it's more of lagging indicators, but like tracking your sales against that and just trying to see some patterns there. But, it's like, it's a little less cut and dry and a little bit more like feeling-ish, but it's based on real data. It's just that your brain is computing complex data and synthesizing it for you into a feeling, maybe rather than like actual data, the way that I prefer.
Yeah. And it is easier generally with a roastery. Like if your conversion rate from people who land on your website is around 4%, then if you can drive more traffic to the website, generally that'll lead to more sales, more conversions. I often find myself using the phrase, take one step back and squint your eyes and you'll see what you're looking for. It's not right there, but it's there. You just got to kind of interpolate.
Squint your eyes is perfect.
Yeah.
As someone with an astigmatism.
Yeah.
It's
same. Are there things that you have seen done or you personally did back in the day, proactive steps you took to keep the business on an upward trajectory year over year, like to keep it on that? You tossed out, growing 30% year over year. Proactive things that you would do. For example, for a concrete example, I've seen coffee shops put table toppers, little tents on the tables, prompting people to leave a Google review as a proactive step, a proactive thing they could do to drive people. Of course, there's marketing and there's paid ads and there's other things you can do. But what kind of things did you guys do to keep yourself sort of proactively on that upward trajectory?
This is going to feel like a non-answer from a tactical standpoint, because I know that like people out there want to clear, like, do this and this will be the result that you get. I'm not going to give that to you. Protecting the core experience of your guest is the most essential thing that you can do to see your business succeed. And so protecting that is hands down the most important thing that you can do proactively. And a lot of times it's the last thing that people want to reach for. And so I would say, go and audit your business for how good of a job you're actually doing. That's the most proactive thing you can do. Like, spend time actually understanding when a guest comes into my space, what is the experience they're getting? And go in honestly, right? And like take your, well, but it's really hard to do the, like, put all that away and just go in with an honest, like, eyes forward look and figure out what's going on and make that better. And if you're doing that, like if you do that regularly, you should see the results of that consistently, 100%. Right? Because again, the core job of the business is to fill a need. So figuring out how to fill that need better is the most effective thing you can do to proactively increase your sales. Now, there are lots of little tactical things like increasing your ticket value by changing where you're merchandising things, how you're merchandising them, picking your high margin items that are close to your top sellers and making sure that they're the easiest thing to grab, having multiple locations like at your retail shelving and at your register, having impulse buys close by, having an effective food program that has add-on potential where you can suggestive sell and upsell stuff, training your staff to do all those things. Those are all really core things. And I'm not saying that there's no reason to do them. There definitely is. But from a tactical standpoint, it's really easy to miss the forest for the trees.
100%.
And so like, it really is essential to like go back and just make sure that those things are protected and then evaluate.
I love that actually. And that I think of it often as concentric circles, like start here in the core and then you can go out to the next rung and the next rung and the next rung. And one of the most, highly engaged with posts I ever did on Instagram was about how you, as owners, you need to sit in your cafe once a month and just watch. And because I've learned so much from when I used to do more in-person site visits from just sitting and watching. And then but it was crazy because I would report back to the owners what I saw and share with them verbatim what was said. And they would often be like, no, that's not what happened. Like, what? I have nothing to gain from lying to you. Plus you've paid me thousands of dollars to be here and sit in your cafe. So just then do it yourself and see for yourself. But as a core, like step one or even step zero, like it's so foundational. It almost sounds like a non-answer at first, but I think what you said, I think it's spot on. I think it's the first step and something owners don't do. They often don't realize that their staff is not keeping the promise to the customers, not in the way that you might think. And then beyond that, did you guys have you ever experimented with not pairings like, hey, do you want to try this Happy Meal style bundle? I don't mean that, but like training the staff to connect things you offer with other things you offer. So if somebody comes in and asks for a particular drink, there's like a particular food item that goes really well with that. Did you guys ever intentionally train them, or did you do that? It just so happened to organically, or what did that look like? Encouraging people. I've been in coffee shops and other places where you order something and they're trained to say like, that's a great choice. Have you ever tried this other thing that would go great with it? I'm just curious if you guys did anything with that.
Yeah, I didn't actively do that from a sense of like, here's what you recommend when somebody orders this thing, recommend this thing. I didn't do that. What I did do was lean into the concept that Brian Tracy says, which is that sales is a transfer of enthusiasm. And so I really worked hard to like make sure that my staff had the opportunity to become enthusiastic about everything on the menu. So making sure that they had time to try stuff, that they had a genuine and honest opinion about it. And then out of that, and a desire, and searching for a desire for people to practice hospitality, my staff wants to have people to have a great experience. And so when they've tried something and they're like, that actually goes super well with this thing. Like it creates a more organic sort of way that people can have a chance to offer that. And like part of great hospitality is thinking about like, what is the best experience that this person can have and how can I help them have that? And sometimes it's recommending a specific pairing for something. Sometimes maybe not, but
totally.
I would say in that sense, I didn't exactly train people for it, but try to create the conditions that would allow for it, if that makes sense.
No, that's awesome. I love that. That makes total sense. Shifting gears a little bit to the owner who is maybe sitting down and going back over their numbers. And just for the sake of a concrete example that we can talk through, they haven't been going through their numbers every pay period. They're kind of sitting down and looking backwards and like, oh, this downward trend, it started like 6 months ago. What would be kind of, I'm sort of assuming based on what we've talked so far, like that might be the time for a SWOT analysis and ask that question, like, okay, why, what happened as a first step. And I understand we'll quickly get into like a case by case basis based on the results of the SWOT analysis and the reason why sales took a downward turn. And so there's going to be a category that would be case by case for truly, but what are some things that owners can do? They can look at as like concrete, actionable, like, hey, sales are down 20% over this time last year. The trend started 6 months ago. We didn't catch it, but now we are, our cash position is such that I just ran payroll and I had to take money out of my personal account to run this last pay period, this last payroll. Like that's the situation. And so what would we say to somebody who finds themselves in that position? Like, hey, go do your SWOT analysis, go figure out why, of course, a lot of it will depend on why, but then what should they do? Like somebody who's listening to this, we can't see their financials from here. We can't help them figure out why, but here's some things to like dig into as soon as possible.
Yeah. My first recommendation, when, again, like you mentioned this earlier, like maybe you should have been raising the flag a while ago, but now it's like you're at your Hail Mary here and like you're pulling money out of your account to run payroll.
Yeah.
First thing you have to do is triage, right? Like you have to stop the bleeding as much as humanly possible. And so in that kind of a situation, like you got to start trimming some hours, right? And like cutting back on non-essential things that truly are non-essential. And that can look like a number of different ways. That might necessitate some hard conversations about needing to temporarily reduce some hours for everyone equally on your team. Or maybe it looks like asking some folks that have been more part-time to, see if you can help them find some other work and just drill in on the folks you already have. But if you can't run payroll, that means you have too many people or something's wrong in the business. The other option is that maybe you're costing, like you haven't done a costing exercise in a while and your cogs are down. And so maybe you need to bump that up. But in the short term, when it's a marginal type of question, like you have to focus on that quick expense. That's where the bleeding is mostly coming from, and then go figure out what's going on. Yeah. So that'd be a first step, is like buy yourself some time, right? Because if you can't make payroll, you're closed, right? So you got to make payroll, right? And so make sure you have enough cash to float with those payrolls. If you've got enough, then you have enough time to go figure out what's actually going on. But you may have to stop the bleeding. And if you're completely out of cash, like you got to go figure that out like now, but stop the bleeding first. Okay. Then the next step is like when you have started asking why, and maybe you're starting to get some answers, the internal ones that are things that you have control over, like your guest experience, all of that, I think is a little bit more self-explanatory to people.
Totally.
It's just like, hey, go fix those things. Like make sure you have stock on stuff, make sure that your team is trained properly to deliver on the experience that you agreed to, make sure that they know how to steam milk properly, that they know how to build those drinks correctly, all of those sorts of things. The ones that are like the outside external challenges, like the threats that you face from shifting demographics, from an economic downturn, from seasonal shifts, those ones are a little bit more complicated and require a little bit more careful approach and a little bit more tactical. And so I'll spend some time sharing how I would approach those things. Yeah. If I was sitting in that boat, because maybe that is you, just to avoid the label of being too head in the sky and not like boots on the groundy enough. But I'm just going to share a few examples. So let's talk about like a general economic downturn, right? Which our economy is like facing this weird sort of bifurcation. A lot of economists are calling it a K-shaped economy, where the more luxury, like high-end things are performing super, super well because the upper middle class is doing okay right now. And where the super budget-friendly stuff is performing really, really well. But everything in the middle has sort of been like hollowed out. So it's, it's challenging for brands that are not a value brand or not like a quality luxury brand. They're sort of in that middle spot, which a lot of cafes had positioned themselves to be in that type of a spot, right? And so you're probably feeling that crunch. Yeah. And so if you're in that kind of a boat, you have a couple of options, right? One is to evaluate the values of your business, right? What did you start this business for? And if your values lean you toward one end of that K versus another end of that K, lean into it, right? Just full tilt into that thing. What I would recommend not doing is, if you said that you started a business that's focused on quality, trying to go win on price, that's not going to win.
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's like, that's a complete 180 on your values. So don't do that. But if you can make like a 15-degree realignment, if like you were trying to be like an upper middle tier, like, hey, we want to have great coffee, but we don't want to be the best cafe around. Maybe trying to be the best cafe around is actually what's going to help you address that, right? Because you're already close enough, like you're closer, so you can double down on that particular thing. That's one potential. That's a slower sort of response. The other sort of things that you can do are to like drive in on a more value oriented thing. If you're closer to that, that's like one potential. And then the other one is to just wait. Just buy yourself as much time as possible, because some of these economic downturn type of things are temporary, right? And like any economy goes through a boom and bust cycle. And so that is probably not a long-term thing. It reminds me of during the pandemic time when everyone was like staying home, and I started selling like gallon iced lattes, which is really popular and people still do that now. But I had so many people ask if I was going to like systematize it and start selling them more regularly and like make investments into like canning lines and all that sort of a thing for it. It's just like, I really don't think that this is a long-term need that people have. Like people want to go to cafes because that's the real need and they just can't right now. And so this is a way to fill a temporary need that they have while I'm waiting, essentially. This is just like enough cash to pay the bills while we're waiting for these environmental conditions to change. And so if you're kind of in that kind of a boat too, sometimes it just looks like trim the fat, tighten your belt, like really drive in on making sure that your team is working efficiently, that you aren't wasting things, just like really strap in and do everything that you can, because it will come back to the point where people want that quality thing done well, but not like the very, very best, just like a great neighborhood cafe. Like people are going to want that again. That is a real need that humans have. It's just the people who need that most right now are a little bit squeezed more than others. And so like buying time and just doing what you can to stay alive until that comes back, and then you can be on the front end of it, is a much better solution than closing down entirely. And then when the economy does revert, some other person's going to get that spot that you just left vacated.
Yeah.
So like that's one thing to consider. Changing demographics is a big one too. If you're in an area where a lot of people have been moving, or maybe new people are moving in, like consider remarketing for some of those people and like introducing yourselves to those new people. Find ways to build relationships with that, like with realtors and people who are helping facilitate these, like the moves in and out. And then ask the question of like, are the people who are moving here, are they the same kinds of people that we were serving previously? And if not, like maybe the demographic has shifted enough to where we need to reevaluate some things. And generally speaking, people moving into an area share the values of the area that they're moving into, and that's part of why that they're doing that. So you're probably okay, but it may not be the case, right? And sometimes you'll have entirely new types of people moving into an area, and so maybe you should think about how to serve them well. And that may look like retooling your business model and maybe your values, if your values have shifted personally or as a company. And just reorienting around some of those things, that could be the right move.
Yeah, man.
I mean, there's so many other tactical things. I know we're running a little short on time, but those are a few things that come to mind.
One thing that popped into my head that would go back in the first bucket of preventative, but you and I have talked about it before, and it just remembered it as you were talking about the different practical tactical action steps you would take, is preventative wise, improving your cash position when things are going well, so that you have a longer runway if things ever do start to go off the rails. And because this is a guess, this is a sort of a mind reading, and I'm not a mind reader, but it seems like almost because we have often a sort of implicit underlying belief that money is actually evil and dirty. And so having a bunch of it sitting in an account, improving our cash position, sounds like the most greedy, evil thing you could possibly do. But it is not for personal gain or anything. It's for these seasons where you want to avoid having to dip into your personal bank account to make payroll. You want to give yourself as long of a runway as possible. And that generally means a larger number in the bank account than most owners think, which is why I like to do a miles till empty calculation with clients, where we look at, hey, what does it cost on average to be open for one day? Okay, and how much do you have in the bank? Okay, so you've got 1.5 days. Your miles till empty calculation is 1.5 days before you would, be bankrupt and have to overhaul your business model or something. And as a preventative measure, putting some things in place and not looking at the number that would be appropriate with the eyes that you would use for your personal finances. You're putting on kind of a different set of glasses and looking at what is that number for a business, because it's going to be many, many dollars higher than what it would be, a 3 to 6 month emergency fund for a person or for a family versus a fund for a business. It would be very different, probably order of magnitude different for most people. Any final thoughts before we part ways for these coffee shop and coffee roastery owners that maybe find themselves in a pinch where they're just kind of realizing, shoot, this really started 6 months ago and I'm not sure what to do about it?
I guess my final thought would be encouragement that you can do this. You've already done a lot of hard things. You've opened up a business and you've put yourself out there. And even if it feels scary and like you don't always have the exact answers, I think you can do this. So that'd be my encouragement, is to go dig in deep. Do the things that you've already been doing well. Try to improve in the areas where you could improve on, and you got this.
Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts, and thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your insights and your time as always.
Glad to be back.
Thank you so much for watching our conversation with Maxwell Mooney. We hope you found it helpful in avoiding sales going down in the first place and helpful in terms of what to do if you find that sales are lower than expected. If you want more help and more support building a profitable coffee business that takes great care of people, be sure to click on the first link in the description to access our free course, The Profitable Coffee Business. In that course, we will guide you through all of the things that we have learned, all of the things that we take our clients through, how to build a profitable coffee business that takes great care of every single person, including you, the owner. That course is free. It's inside of our school community, so click the link in the description to access that community today. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care.